from the iMember Media Sonoran Desert Studios. Welcome to Follow Up. Welcome back to iMember Media Sonoran Desert Studios. This is Follow Up, and I am your host, Michael Wood. Now we are talking about the Joe Rogan Experience number 670. I was supposed to start the follow-up series talking about the Dogma Debate podcast with David Smalley, as it really was about the first one I did, but we've had trouble getting that podcast. David, I don't know what's up with you. Gotta get that thing done, buddy. Dig up those old archives. So, as we wait until then, I figured we should move on and go ahead and hit up the one that kind of got most people knowing actually most people, like anybody actually knows who I am. What did get some people paying attention and has probably been seen by anyone out there that's going to listen to this. So, I haven't been starting this follow-up series, podcast series, which I thought I was really going to dive right into. I've had a bunch of distractions with surgeries and stuff like that in life. But I mean, honestly, I think this podcast that we're about to go over kind of gave a reputation of me to be open and honest. And I felt really open and honest at that time. And this thing was on July 8th, 2015. So more than 3 years later, I don't really think like much has changed in the actual reality of policing, but the reality of police reform and solutions is dramatically different. There isn't a movement for police reform. Whatever I talked about here, whatever eyes it opened, if any, hasn't led to anything, at least not yet. No actual tangible changes in improving policing in a way that it would improve our society. If anything, I really think we've regressed. And I've regressed. I've put up walls, haven't been that honest self. And maybe it would have been better if I did. I don't know. I really think that the politics, what is the word am I looking for? Come on, guys, help me out. Politics. Identity politics. The identity politics of everything these days is just made it impossible. I know it's a sign of winning an argument, but we haven't actually talked about the points and the merit of my discussions and reform efforts and plans and solutions, whether it's civilian-led policing or it's just basically the four causations or anything like that, what to do. And I think it's because partly to do with me being a white dude. But, I mean, it really ends up attacking everyone, and we don't get anywhere. The idea that the left eats itself is something that I really thought wasn't true anymore. And the right-wingers, stupid thing to say, but the more conservative people out there would tell me, it's great that you're out there trying, but this is all going to really fall on deaf ears anyway. The left will turn on itself. They will destroy you. They will discredit you. They will attack your character. And I didn't really believe him. I felt we had a different thing going on. I thought there was a movement and a moment. So I feel like I need to get back to not having any walls up. But I don't know what good it does, really. I mean, I didn't have any walls up, and it kind of got me, going on these podcasts and having people see and doing documentaries and stuff. But that's not me. Like, I mean, never in my goal of doing anything. I'd rather sit in the backyard and make prickly pear jelly. I mean, I still feel some moral responsibility to it, but I just don't. I don't know if I have the power, if I have the influence, or like why the fuck should I even care? If I mean, I'm not a white knight. I'm here to answer questions and help provide the literature. I'm not here with an agenda that you should do something. I feel like these things would make a better society, but that's just my perspective. That's my opinion. Who the fuck am I? I'm a servant, and I'm going to serve the people. And if the people don't want what I have or don't want my suggestions, well, I mean, like, who the hell am I to say, really? So imagine this will end up being a 3-part series because it's just such a long podcast. This one's already 2.5 hours. So I don't see how we could even talk about it and not take up way more. So we'll most likely break this into 3 parts. And we'll go ahead and go over it and see what I said in there during that interview on July 2015. And I'll go ahead and look through some of these comments on YouTube and see and find some ones to reply to. I don't know if I said or not. I can't remember now. We'll just go back over it. But one day I was over at my friend Jimmy's house in Pennsylvania. I guess this would have been in like June or something, 2015. And I got a DM on Twitter. And the identity politics is why my Twitter is gone too. You know, it just wasn't it all became about my character, not about what I was actually talking about. And by character, I'm not saying I have any, we all have character flaws, but I'm not saying there's anything there. It's just that we can't even talk about the ideas. We just talk about me and whether I'm white or black or whether I had tattoos or said this word or should have said it this way or my tone or too aggressive, too blunt, too this, too that, whatever. And I mean, I was obviously super excited. Finally got out there. Leap helped me. I don't have any ways of getting out there. I don't have any money. That remains true today. No vacations for me. No flying around the country. I have a podcast that I'm doing in San Jose, and I did some work with CNN, but they both have to fly me out. I don't have the $500 to make a trip to LA, or I don't even know if it's probably more than that. So the first time I went this time, I had called around and finally got some members that were associated in police reform with a organization formerly called LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. They've changed their name to Law Enforcement Action Partnership. And they helped get me out there to discuss about this stuff. They're at the time, they were mainly focused on ending the drug war, but have definitely expanded since then to be a more broadly encompassing idea of police reform. So check out LEAP, a very good organization. I think it's lawenforcementaction.org now, or something close to that. So let's just go ahead and let's set us up a little bit. So I get the message and I go out there. I got a black car, one of those Uber Blacks Rogan and Jamie arranged for me to get. And then I showed up there and introduced myself and we talked and I left. I know a lot of people think, like, did you smoke weed with him? Did you have fun? Did you guys seem to get along? Yeah, that really wasn't how it was. I guess he was professional on his end, and I think these things are largely about just the business that they are. I mean, whether he's aware of it or not, he's directly incentivized to go ahead and do what makes him money, do what gets him popularity, do what makes his friends agree with him. You know, it's just human nature, even if we don't realize we're doing it. And the other thing I find quite interesting is that these things, the Rogan shows I've noticed kind of have the audience isn't that much of Rogan built in, which I would have thought. It is more about the guest. You can see that whoever the guest is correlated to how many views. So it's not like there's a built-in audience. It's like for somebody goes with those previous people. So being that this podcast at this time, 670, has 702,000 views, I think I'll at least take a little pride in that I didn't come with an audience. It was more about the merits of the conversation and what we were talking about. So I think that is something that at least it stands out from the pack of not bringing its own audience. I mean, the Elon Musk video, last time I saw it, had like 12 million views, when it looks like Rogan's inherent audience is somewhere around 300,000. Meaning that if you're just any Joe Schmo without any, relatively unknown, like a scholar or something, then you'll get right around 300,000 views, maybe a little less, actually. I mean, here's one. John Ronson, who I had actually heard from Rogan, had 668, and it only has 250,000 views, being quite old. So, I don't know. Well, 3 years old. So let's go ahead and get into this. I'll comment and we'll see where we are.
And we're live. What's up, dude? How are you?
Good, Joe. How are you?
Very good. Good to see you. For folks who don't know the story, Michael, as he prefers to be talked to as, directed as, referred to as, you were a cop in Baltimore. And you put a string of tweets that I read that was on Huffington Post. And that's when I got interested in this whole story. Because it's very rare that someone who's a cop comes out and tells about all the shit that they experience. I have friends that are cops, and I know there's a lot of good cops out there. Just like there's good everything. Sam Harris and Dan Carlin just did a podcast recently together. It's a really excellent podcast. And one of the things they were talking about people in power, people that are politicians, that there's the whole spectrum. You get great people that are genuinely trying to do good, and you also get psychopaths. It seems like you ran into a lot of fucking psychopaths. How long were you a cop for?
I was a cop for 11 years. But
you look like you're 20.
Thanks.
How's that possible?
I don't know. Good genetics.
Good genetics, and I guess the stress didn't fuck with you.
It didn't really.
Really?
To be honest.
How did it not?
My idea of what an officer should be was to be more RoboCop-ish, like where I took my emotions out of the job and handled it strictly as enforcing the law. So if I was spit on, I realized they weren't spitting at me; they were spitting at the uniform. It was just irrelevant. I understood it wasn't personal, so I separated that as like a role, maybe, like I was acting.
That's a great attitude to have, I guess. Is that something that you thought about before you became a cop, or is it something you cultivated while you were a cop?
I can't say for sure, but it seems like I actually think that was the wrong way to think. But if you analyze it and you're at that time, you think, well, how am I not going to be biased? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be biased by separating myself from the situation and kind of acting as autonomous. Right. But I think that also made me blind, because if I was being blind to racism, then I was being blind to when we were doing it. Even if I wasn't doing it, I wasn't seeing it when it occurred either, because I was literally blinding myself to it.
So you...
Yeah, and what we're saying there is the actions. I still agree that is largely the case. And one of the hardest things I've had to discuss publicly is that we're talking about racist actions, and just because someone takes racist actions doesn't mean they are racist, nor that they had racist intent. It means they took a racist action. And if you are trying to essentially not look for racism, which I was, then of course you're not going to find it. Largely, I think this has to do with what I've evolved to understand, is that race isn't real, but racism is. And if that racism, especially when it's in the system, or it's codified in our kind of cultural experience and the background of like even the American experience, then we have to find the racism in the system and in the backgrounds, not within the people. If we look and we continue to focus on the people and demonize the people for that mistake, then we're really going the wrong path. It's about a methodology, and so I think that being colorblind as a concept of how you treat people is great, but it's not good for systems.
You're saying that if you were blind to racism against you, then you were also blind to cops that were committing racism?
No, so if I looked at it as whether I was talking to somebody of Latino descent, of black, whatever, male, female, I looked at them just as equally, regardless. So if you do that, then you don't see that you're disproportionately enforcing things against somebody, because I'm literally not trying to see that.
So that's interesting. So by trying to treat everyone as equal, you weren't taking account of how many black people you were dealing with, how many Latinos you were dealing with, how many people of color, how many minorities. Is that a fair assessment?
It is fair to the extent that I'll admit that when I was in the Eastern District, I would intentionally lock white people up so that I could make sure my numbers weren't like my squad. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, look, they look up 95% African Americans. I didn't want to see that. Yeah, this has been a critique that I've gotten from a lot of white people. Yeah, I mean, and it's definitely true. So a little bit more about why this takes place and why I did it is that what happens is essentially police look for what's out of place. And this remains true all over in ways that Black Lives Matter type side of argument might critique police and general critiques of police. That what we do is whenever it's not where it belongs, and society kind of forms these perspectives and stuff about what belongs and what doesn't. So I'm not saying it's right about whether it belongs or it doesn't, but what appears to not belong in the area is what cops kind of feel like they're looking for. It's a bit of a trope. I don't know if all cops say that, but it's something I've heard a lot, is to look for what's out of place. So, you know, whether somebody's wearing a winter coat in the summer, that would be weird and out of place, so you might want to investigate that. Windows that are up when they shouldn't be, you know, door open in the cold weather, whatever. Anything like that, you're looking for what's out of place. So if you're in a white neighborhood and if somebody black gets stopped, in our cultural conditioning, this is something that's out of place. So the officer can completely not have any racist intent or even a racist thought going through their head. And this is how they can take a racist action without thinking about it. Now, was my action racist? I mean, of locking up white guys, no, because it wasn't premised on them. I wasn't mad at them. It was about the way the system is. And so, being that I was in all black neighborhoods all the time, I was arresting black people all the time. I mean, that's where you are. Crime is a measurement of police activity, not citizen activity. I was assigned to black neighborhoods, and thus, you know, I was arresting black people. But I knew that wouldn't look good. Like, we have had those discussions, and people knew about disproportionate police enforcement. So I felt that every white person, which was out of place and very easy to catch in East and West Baltimore, that being white in a black neighborhood is still just what's out of place, and it's one, you know, it's why they were easy to pick out, is because they were out of place. Well, I'm not going to say that's any justification, but these things are in the YouTube comments probably too, so I was probably answering a bit of a YouTube comment and complaint that I get. I mean, of course, it's reasonable to complain about that. A lot of people complain about me never having said anything while I was on the force, but I mean, I've gone over this 1,000 times. I didn't understand it as well. It takes a long time to understand it. And then, you know, speaking out never seemed like an option. Speaking out afterwards, I believed, is a tactical error. I don't think I can talk to police. I think people trying to snitch on cops or testifying against cops, that's been done 1,000 times over. It doesn't get us anywhere. So I wanted to at least try something new. It's just crazy to keep doing the same thing over and over. So I have never turned in another officer. I've pretty much threw some command members under the bus, but if you were an actual officer who worked the streets and was trying to police, then I've never said anything, and I never will. I don't know. I think they're pawns in a system, and I think it's looking the wrong way. I wanted to see some kind of balance, so I was like aware that, hey, we're locking too many black people up, but I don't think it just didn't compute at the time. It takes time for it to settle in.
So what about those poor white people? that you locked up on purpose?
I got nothing.
Were they guilty at least?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I never locked up anybody who wasn't guilty.
Well, that's good. But you experienced a lot of shit. I mean, some of the things that I read, okay, here's one. Punting a handcuffed, face-down suspect in the face after a foot chase. Pissing and shitting inside suspects' homes during raids, on their beds and clothes. Jacking up and illegally searching thousands of people with no legal justification. This is crazy, man. This is crazy stuff.
Well, when you're doing it, it's just what police do. You know it. You've seen it on TV. You've seen it driving by. You've seen a corner full of black guys with the cops searching them. You've seen it. And when they're going into those pockets, you can't go into those pockets. You simply can't. But we do.
You're not allowed to.
Right.
It's illegal.
You have no way of doing it unless you're getting a frisk where you can justify plain field doctrine, and then you can get into the pocket. But that's extremely rare. I mean, that's a specific set of circumstances under a Terry stop, and that's nothing that you see.
What's a Terry stop?
So Terry versus Ohio was a case law that established, I could be slightly off in the particulars, but if somebody was displaying the characteristics of an armed person and you had suspicion or a hunch that criminal activity was afoot, you could stop that person and conduct a frisk of the outer garments. So
outer garments.
Right. So just a pat down, essentially.
So does that outer garments mean a jacket?
Right, a jacket. So if you had, if like you thought they had a weapon on their hip, you could pull back the jacket and kind of pat it down. But it seems as the law is written, you'd have to even like squish it, and it's just what you can touch from the outside.
So if you patted the outside of the jacket and felt a gun that was in his waist.
Well, this is an issue that is one of like the bare basics of policing, where I do think it's violated constantly. But the point here is this would be a decent opportunity for anybody if they want to test their police friends or family members. Go ahead, and if you can't clearly articulate a Terry stop, you do not know how to be a police and don't deserve your badge. I'm pretty happy here after all that time that I was able to articulate it. I hadn't been on the street for 6 years at this point as an actual officer. I was only out there as a supervisor. And as a see how I'm justifying it. Like, the supervisor should know it more than anyone else. But as a supervisor, you don't have to have those things really off the top of your head. You're in review status. But anyway, moving on.
Then you could arrest him or take that gun.
Right. You're perfectly fine.
But you can't dig in his pockets and look for crack.
Right. Well, you can if you have that's plain field doctrine. So if through my expertise, I can tell that is packaging that is consistent with narcotics that are distributed in the area, and I can justify that, then I can go and retrieve those narcotics. That's an extremely, I mean, if you can just think about that, how do I really know that bag in your pocket is marijuana, not oregano? I'm not sure if that should be legally justified or not.
So that stop and frisk shit that they were doing in New York, they're not doing that anymore, right? Isn't that the deal? We talked about that on a podcast once. We went over all the times that it was just innocent people, and it's fucking staggering. It's disgusting. That stop, they would just be able to pull black kids. I said white kids. Not really though, right? It was mostly black kids. They would just be able to pull them over and go, hey, let me check you. And they would just check their bodies. And most of the time, they were innocent. Most of the time. There was nothing to check for.
I'm going to tell you that 99.9999% of them have nothing on them because they're not even usually documented. So in Baltimore, we'll do stop and frisk, and if you do a stop and frisk, I still agree with that. One thing of import to note is that New York wasn't just letting cops do that. They were still articulating Terry stops. And so they made high crime areas more expansive, school zone things that would kind of lower the standard for the requirements to reach a Terry stop. And then obviously the officers would go ahead and write them up as Terry stops. So there wasn't that many Terry stops obviously occurring, but they were encouraging officers to go ahead and skirt the rules and everything else to get those done. You have to conduct an entire specific report called a stop and frisk report that justifies everything you did. And so it's a big pain. So no one's going to write that. So they just do it and they move on. So your stats are, any stat you see is junk. So, and the stats that you see that for a time period, it's not the case anymore, especially in Baltimore. But for a good time being, I imagine this is what New York did and what Baltimore did too, was go ahead and take that reporting and required reporting, which was supposed to be full-fledged reports, and shrink them down on the size of like a ticket, where you had kind of basic checkboxes in easy areas, and that way you can increase how many you could do by go ahead and systemically, essentially skirting case law.
That are junk sit there and say 1 in 1,000 actually have something on them. So think about what reality is.
Jesus. What led to you leaving the police force? And like, was this a build up? Was this something that you thought about for a long time?
Are you ready to laugh?
Yes.
Okay. We had a shooting range in the basement of the Eastern District. We had to move something. We had to put one desk on top of another desk. It slipped, and I tore my shoulder out. There's your exciting story for why I left.
That's it?
That's it.
What was the injury?
I
had no idea that I said the full story on that, which is baffling because I found people in the past on Twitter going through the police circles and talking about how a filing cabinet fell on me. And I always wondered where the hell they got the filing cabinet
my shoulder
from.
reconstruct.
Oops, I figured they just made it up. But I freaking said what happened. Anyway.
It just tore everything out, and they had to put it back together.
Like what
I have no
specifically?
idea. It came out, and so the
Labrum,
clavicle,
rotator
labrum,
cuff?
not rotator cuff.
No.
So the cartilage that folds over just doesn't hold it into place anymore. So it can come out easily. So if it can come out easily, they don't let you be a cop anymore, and they process
Still,
you.
it can come out easily right now.
Yeah.
So it's permanent forever.
Yeah, it's permanent. Right.
It's fucked up.
Right.
From moving a desk.
Yes.
All the crime solving.
I don't know what to tell you. It's not an exciting story. I've got nothing. I have nothing.
So you left, and then you decided. How long ago was this?
I got injured in like late 2009, but it took time to do the surgeries, try and come back. I mean, I tried to come back. I came back, and I was going coded to a call with lights and sirens. Went to turn down a street, and the shoulder popped out. So I went up onto the sidewalk. They said I had to grab it with the other hand, and that's when I had to go back in. And then they said I need another surgery. Not doing another surgery, so
From a fucking turn. Wow. Fuck. You need to go to Cain Velasquez's surgeon. Fix that dude up pretty good, I guess. So you decided once you knew you were out, you'd done the surgery, you couldn't be a police officer anymore because your shoulder blows out. What made you decide to go public with all this stuff?
Well, I've actually talked about this for a long time. We had a lot of local media and local street reporters and stuff like that I was friends with on Twitter, and we would talk about these things for the last couple of years. We would just go back and forth talking about things, and I had no idea that anybody would pick up on this. I thought I was just going to be talking to the same reporters and the same local group of people that I've been talking to the whole time, so I came back and saw that somebody started paying attention.
And what was that like for you?
Shocking.
Yeah, we were talking about it before the show started, this newfound notoriety, how weird it is. Like, describe it.
When we land in LA, guy asked if I was on TV talking about police, and it's like, I don't know. I'm used to being anonymous, so I'm used to just going and minding my own business and not bothering anybody, and then suddenly people know who you are. It's awkward, and especially for what they know you are, because every time now a cop looks at me, I'm like, oh, come on, you know, it's going to. I'm the bad guy now, so I can't trust them as well. It makes it I'm kind of stuck in a weird place.
So when this most recent Baltimore incident took place, the Freddie Gray incident, the eruption of public attention on police brutality in Baltimore, and the marches and all the news stories, then people started really paying attention to you. Is that fair to?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that was the case. Maybe somebody had followed me before, and somebody with a powerful retweet. I have no idea.
And so what was explain how it all went down. Like, how did you become this public figure?
I mean, I literally have no comprehension of what happened. I decided that I was just going to talk about some of the things we do, so that it's like, look, this is what we do. Let's not try to pretend that we don't do it. We do it. So it's not about whether we're going to blame the cops that did it or whether we're going to go back and have retribution. We need to realize that this is what we do. Stop denying it. The black community has been lying for the last 50 years. We need to fix it, and in a realistic, scientific way where we have some empathy and treat people like human beings, because we don't.
What is Baltimore like to someone who my buddy John Rollo lives in Baltimore. Shout out to John Rollo. He listens to the podcast all the time, and the way he describes it is, I mean, I've been there a few times for the UFC, but I haven't, gone into the bad neighborhoods. I didn't watch The Wire, so. But watching this whole incident and seeing these people talk about how many times they've been arrested and how many times they've been.
Despite my problems with David Simon, if you haven't watched The Wire, you gotta get on it. Get it together.
Fucked over by cops, and how crazy it is there, and how much crime there is there, and how much violence there is there, and what it's like trying to grow up there and become a normal person, and what a fucking uphill struggle that is. Describe Baltimore to somebody like me.
Okay, so Baltimore, like anywhere else, is largely good, but it has a microcosm of it. It's like the prototype for the prison cycle. So somebody comes up in a neighborhood and they just have no hope, and they keep feeding that school to prison cycle over and over and over again, and it has a deep history in Baltimore, so it invades everything. So whether you're talking about are the things the police do, or whether you're talking about where they live. In Baltimore, you have clusters. So you'll have a black neighborhood here, a black neighborhood here, black neighborhood here, white money, white money, white money, low income white, and it's in these clusters. But these clusters were intentionally formed by the law in Baltimore. I can't even say how long ago, maybe 100 years ago. And you still have deeds now that say you can't sell the house to an African-American person. So like, even if you were a doctor there, you couldn't, if you were a black doctor, you couldn't buy a house in a nice white neighborhood 60 years ago. So you had to still go buy a house in that little area, and that if you're clustering everybody like that, it just pulls everybody down constantly. It's like they're just constantly beat down. There's just no way out.
So 60 years ago, you couldn't buy a house if you were a black guy in certain neighborhoods.
Right.
And was it law? They had this on the books?
It was in the deeds.
Jeez.
Still, some of the deeds still have it.
Still, what?
Right.
Still to this day?
No court's going to uphold it, but you'll still see it. You'll see it in there.
So,
you'll see the language.
So if there's a white neighborhood today, there's a possibility that some black...
You can totally find these online now these days. Let me see if I can find one while we watch it.
Person who wants to move into this white neighborhood might encounter some resistance because of this.
I don't know if they're going to counter resistance, but they're going to see it in the deed. That's going to make you feel awkward.
Fuck. Why is it still in there?
Because it's the original deed. They keep carrying it over. Yeah.
Why wouldn't they change that?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea why this city is that way, why these people did these things. It doesn't make sense. Nobody stood objectively, and we created these racist institutions. I mean, they are institutional racism. There's no doubt about it, and it's up and down in these urban environments, in these cities. Cleveland, Ferguson, Baltimore, Atlanta, it's irrelevant. They're all the same.
All these urban environments, there's all over Compton, Watts, Inglewood, there's...
coincidentally, the first one that I found here is talking about race restrictive covenants and property deeds in West Hartford, Connecticut, which states, no person of any race except the white race shall use or occupy any building on any lot, except that this covenant shall not prevent occupancy by domestic servants of a different race employed by their owner or tenant. This language, taken directly from a property deed dated June 10, 1940 in West Hartford's High Ledge Homes Development. And that is on connecticuthistory.org, race-restrictive-covenants-in-property-deeds. That's not even a dash. I think it's a hyphen, whatever. In redlining. So, I mean, yeah, just go ahead and hit Google and you can actually see those things for real.
A ton of places like that in LA as well. It's all over the world. I mean, all over the United States, I should say. There's neighborhoods like that seem almost inescapable.
Did you listen to Mau Mau on Radiolab?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
yeah.
I mean, you know how long back that goes. I mean, this is, so we're denying that we have this. So what people are saying, these cops aren't racist. I'm not saying they are racist. What I'm telling you is they're participating in institutionalized racism, just like everybody in Britain was doing back in Kenya with the Mau Maus, however long ago that was. That was a long time ago. And you're seeing it come out, how it's just the whole thing. If you're participating in it, you're guilty. And that's what I'm telling you. I'm guilty. I participated in it.
Is there a way to fix it?
Well, the easy thing from the police thing is I think empathy is number one. We have to start treating human beings like they're.
Yeah, we're here something different here. Now, I would say that I agree with the empathy is a key from a perspective, but from an actual solution, please go ahead and look at the civilian-led model, which is a basic outline of what I think we should do. You can get that on the iMember Media page, imembermedia.com, on my public speaking page, I think.
They're human beings. We have to, we just arrest them and you throw them in a cage, just like they did with Freddie Gray. And you don't focus on them being somebody's child or your, I mean, race is a social construct. This is my brother and I'm doing this to him. It eventually just doesn't, it's inconceivable.
We've had this conversation 100 times on this podcast where I have always wondered, why is it that we put so much emphasis in trying to repair damage that we've done in other countries, so much emphasis in nation building, so much emphasis in invading places because of whatever perceived threat or whatever natural resource we want to dominate and monopolize, but no emphasis whatsoever in fixing our own inner cities, no emphasis whatsoever in fixing the ghettos, and just constructing social centers, giving people places that are safe to go to, and somehow or another educating people and lifting them out one by one out of the fucking constant cycle that they're in, this never-ending cycle of poverty and crime, and being surrounded by it. Man, everyone knows that people imitate their atmosphere. It's just a part of being a human being. That's why accents exist. That's why people in some parts of the world do weird things, because everyone around them does it, like, weird clothes that they wear, or weird rituals, scarring of their face, what have you. We imitate what's around us. And when you're around a lot of fucking crime, and you grow up around a lot of fucking crime and a lot of people with records, criminal records, and it becomes normal. And I don't know how to fix that, and I don't see any effort whatsoever in really engineering some sort of a solution to what these poor, unfortunate people are born into.
Well, for police, it's even worse because we're perpetuating that situation. So we're the ones doing that cycle. So when we see a 16, one time I was a shift commander in the Eastern District, and I'm telling my guys, stop pulling over old white ladies. Stop pulling over that young, cute girl. Stop. We focus on who commits the crimes. And who commits the crimes in Baltimore? 16 to 24-year-old black males. That's who's committing the crimes. So focus on them. That makes sense. Until you complete the cycle and realize that you started doing that because of institutionalized racism in your organization. And so when you are jacking up those guys in the corner and you do find that dime bag, so you send him to jail, now he can't go to work the next day, so he loses his job, and then he can't make it to court, so he gets his license suspended, and then he's driving, and then you are focusing on those 16 to 24-year-old black males, so now you're more likely to pull them over. Now you pull him over, now he has a suspended license, now he gets his license revoked, and now he can't get to the job legally, and now he's left with selling drugs on the corner. So we're creating it. We have to step back and realize what the facts are on what we're doing. And the number one problem is the drug war, and then we have money and politics. Those are our two big issues that we have to solve before we get anywhere.
Well, what is the money and politics? How does that play in?
So I don't think we can change anything until we stop having politicians that are serving their donors versus serving the people. So somebody that's talking like me is never going to run a police agency as long as all their corporate donors are saying, no, 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 you keep those animals in the cages, because that's what they do. I mean, that's like a joke in Baltimore that police are actually the zookeepers. You keep everything in and don't let it hit the county. So that's our role. That's what we're doing. So your mayors and your politicians are going to continue to encourage that. They're not going to take a risk and say, all right, how do we lower juvenile possession of marijuana? You know that. I know you do. You know you legalize it.
Yeah.
and you control it, and rates actually go down. Whether we're overseas or we're in Colorado, your possession rates for marijuana will go down among juveniles. But we don't do that. We keep looking at everything like we're a hammer searching for nails, and we keep looking for what we're going to hit to stop it, instead of standing back and using science and figuring out what are we actually going to do to fix this problem, what will actually have results.
This is a very...
Like most cops, the emotions felt when pinning the badge on my uniform for the first time was a source of immense pride, but also a shocking reality to the complication of performing a duty under the weight of such power and responsibility. The callousness of veterans cops and the braggadocious masculinity of the streets are immature expressions of the generations of trauma enacted on our brothers and sisters from a system oppressing us all. My internal fights with policing, whistleblowing, scholarly endeavors, reform efforts, and politics have failed in exhausting fashion.
And what I'm trying to say is that we are looking at people who are doing nothing new, and if we focus on the actions, then we can fix the things for next time. Because when you focus on people, we end up thinking we can chop their head off, they put a new person in, and something will change. But if we don't focus on the methodologies and the institutions, then we will be totally missing
somebody, put them in a prison cell, do the paperwork, go back out, and do it again. So what we really need is to change the incentives and disincentives so that no matter what the role, we're still going towards that objective that actually serves you.
More occupation, more vehicles, if your answer continues to be violent, because we have to understand that everything about policing is inherently violent. I have come in there with authority and told you what you will do.
I believe one of the reasons behind my struggles is that I had not laid out a consistent and intertwined philosophy of what in the hell I was trying to say. For the philosophical foundations of crime and punishment to be ushered into the 21st century, a reimagination of our institutions is necessary. Building off the famous works of Cesar Beccaria, I construct those pathways to the Enlightenment period of justice. Free will, sanctuary cities, gun control, eyewitness testimony, incarceration, and more must all work together for a prosperous society. Learning these lessons has been a brutal journey for me, and it is unlikely to be an easy one for you, but it is one that we owe to the future, to make a safer world for our children to enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Crimes and Punishments in the 21st Century by yours truly, Michael Wood, is most conveniently ordered from the evil empire Amazon, because we are in that 21st century after all. For the enhanced and expanded audiobook, check out Audible. In the meantime, the philosophical half of Crime and Punishments, all 40-some chapters and then some, is being presented as a free podcast from iMember Media at imembermedia.com and will be available on all major platforms and direct from the publisher. Pause the video or see the links in the notes and prepare for the challenge and adventure of self-critical thought. Yeah, I still agree with that, except for the call on cannabis, marijuana. It's cannabis. Sorry, I made that mistake back then, guys. And I feel like I almost have to address the fact that I'm wearing a Wolfpack shirt. And I think I'm going to say nice things about TYT, which I would not be saying today. I guess I don't have any issue with Wolfpack still. I still believe that something needs to be done to get money out of politics. Constitutional amendment's the only way to do that. And I always believe in letting the Constitution grow and be the living document that it was supposed to be and adaptable for time. And technology changes especially. So I'm okay with the Wolfpack thing here, but I think we're going to get into some other stuff I'm probably not going to be. It's funny to hear me stumble over some of these concepts and developing them as I was seeing it and understanding the core of what policing was, how things started, how this crime data began, which I really obviously didn't quite understand as well at the time of this 3 years ago. So, I mean, I'm a little proud of myself for knowing what I did know, but I still feel like I certainly would have much better answers today.
Very rare to hear a cop talk like this. I'm really happy that you're coming forward and speaking like this, but how many people that were with you in the police force are upset about this?
My closest friends, I think, understand me. I think the vast majority is upset with me, and they're going to be upset with me because what I'm really trying to do is take power away from them. I mean, I really am. I'm trying to take power from them and give it back to the people because we're supposed to be serving them. We're not supposed to be this occupying force. And this pretty little white boy from the county looks like an occupying force in the city. There's no way around it. So I have to be aware of that and think about that. Think about what I'm doing, not be an occupying force. Intentionally actually go out of my way to lift up a situation and de-escalate it and do better than to come in there and be like, you're going to jail, shut up, let's go, which is what I did for a long time.
So when you say the county, what does that mean? When you say white boy from the county, what's the county?
Right, so the suburbs. So in Baltimore, it's kind of weird. It's a little different. So Baltimore is incorporated, so it has nothing to do with the county. So there's like this hard line. So it's not where, and then
the county of what?
Baltimore County.
Oh, okay.
Right, so you have the city by itself. So here in Los Angeles, you think you have Marina Del Rey, you have Inglewood, you have all this stuff is LA. In Baltimore, it's just Baltimore. So everything is concentrated and focused. And me coming from the county, I've never spent any time in the city growing up. I come in just as straight from the Marine Corps. That's ready to roll. We're going to do our thing. I'm going to put on a different uniform and continue my war.
Wow. So that was why you became a cop. So you came right from the military, and it just seemed like a logical progression.
Right. It's a logical progression. I think I went into the Marine Corps to prepare myself. I was a little uncontrolled and decided to go into the Marine Corps to get my shit together. And
discipline.
So I could get into the police department and everything would be, and that was always my goal.
So your goal was always to be a police officer?
Right.
Why was that?
I don't know. Said it since I was a little kid. I think you go in with these grandiose ideas that you're going to help people. And maybe that's why I talk. I mean, it's still evolving that I'm saying these things. So you're bringing up a point, and maybe that's why I talk. Maybe I feel that I wasn't doing what I actually set out to do. I was actually exacerbating the situation.
So you got caught up in the cycle yourself, the cycle of law enforcement and the way law enforcement behaves in Baltimore, and it just became habitual.
Totally. You don't think about it. You just ignore it. So when I say that I had that suspect that I chased and the guy comes up and kicks him in the face, I think to myself, God, that guy's a fucking asshole. But not me. I didn't do it.
Right.
But I have the responsibility to do something there. That was an assault on an innocent victim. It's not as bad as McKinney, but it's assault on an innocent victim that I should have certainly stepped up and done something about. It's just you're in it. You don't. I can't explain it. How you don't see it until you really just start to slowly step back, and it's like, what are we doing here?
We're starting to see more and more.
McKinney was at Texas.
Videotapes, police stories of police brutality. Do you think this is just a result of cell phones? Or is the violence escalating, or has the violence always been there like this, but people are finally finding out about it?
I think it's actually de-escalating the violence. Really? Yeah, I think your cell phones are certainly scaring a lot of cops from doing things, but the only variable here is the proliferation of video cameras. So as you get more and more cameras, you're seeing more and more. But imagine what it was like before the cameras. Cops know the cameras are there. We've known it for a long time. So like, we have pole cameras in Baltimore, and so if we were going to do something, so there's a street called Monument Street that's full of these cameras that are monitored by the city. So as an officer, I always knew that if I was on that street, I kind of had to behave in a different manner because I knew the camera was there. Now we know that the camera is there all the time, so it's got to be much smaller.
Well, there's always these guys that you see that you can't even believe they're real humans. Like that fucking cop in Texas that showed up at the pool party and did the fucking roll like he's Paul Blart Mall Cop. Holy fucking shit. When you find out that that's a real person, you just like...
Right, so think about that situation. So that's the McKinney situation where you have a guy assaulting a 14-year-old girl. And that chief still comes out, and still he has that blinder, that blue blinder, where he's saying there's 11 good cops there. My ass, there are 12 bad cops there because they just witnessed an assault on a 14-year-old girl in a bathing suit and did shit about it. So you have 12 bad cops. But the reason why I'm talking is because I do think those 11 other ones can be spoken to. I think the guy that comes up and pats him on the back then is like, yo, what are you doing? Why is your gun out? If we keep talking to him, then maybe he'll be able to go talk to 2 more people. Maybe he'll realize what he's doing, and we can kind of at least on a grassroots level kind of change.
Yeah, I mean, hell, listening to myself there, I think I should have taken a different angle. I wish I wouldn't have said 11 bad cops, or, you know, it's, that pathway has to be there for them. I think it's, man, I'm not apologizing for them. I mean, they still didn't do the right thing in a moral place, but it's kind of hard for us to critique when we don't create a society and system that gives them a pathway. So it's like, I mean, it's not like, it's totally judging somebody when we're setting a different standard ourselves. So let's fix ourselves before we criticize them, and I should have done that myself beforehand.
What police think they're supposed to be versus what we are.
We've talked about it on the podcast many times, and I think that it's one of the most difficult jobs that a person can do, and one of the jobs that has the least amount of respect. Cops, like, almost routinely are treated with disrespect, and also no one thinks about PTSD for cops.
I hope I disagree.
People think about it all the time when it comes to soldiers. Has become much more in the public eye, but the amount of stress that's a part of being a police officer. What is that like when you're going into these bad neighborhoods and you're dealing with murder, when you're dealing with,
and I wish you wouldn't keep saying
all sorts of different assaults and domestic violence and theft and robbery. What is that like to be a person who deals with that every day, and how much of a factor does that play in these people snapping on people?
It's just hard for me to say because I don't feel like I had that. I did not find the job stressful on the streets. The greatest enemy was from within. They say that in End of Watch. Don't worry about the street. You got to worry about what the other officers are doing.
I missed that too. I heard it was good.
Yeah, it was good. It was the banter back and forth in that movie is very realistic of what cops act like. You think cops are all professional, but we're sitting in the car talking about the same things that anybody else talks about, and then you're, oh shit, something's going on.
Mostly pussy, right? Yeah. Anyway.
So, where were we?
We were talking about how stressful it is.
Right. It's not. It wasn't stressful for me.
Are you a weirdo?
I don't think so. I think I built up that wall.
But do other people have that wall?
Not all of them. I know some of them handle things more personally, so they take that. So I don't think we want those people as cops. I understand it's hard for them. I get that, but the job's not for anybody. You're absolutely right when you.
Now that I kind of think about this, I think we might be talking a little bit about something I talk about tons now, and that's the identity politics and taking something as part of your identity. As we know, I've talked about these. I don't know when I talk about these on podcasts, when I started talking about it, but I think there's a part about physical fear, and not certain people just don't have a fear of physical harm. So it allows you to not have a fight, flight, or freeze response. But I also think that this is part of that identity issue. I did not take being a cop as part of my identity. It's not who I was at any point in time. So that separation made it easy for me to not feel like things were attacked. So I didn't feel that insulting the uniform was insulting me because being a cop was not part of my core identity. I'm sorry if you hear me eating. That's going to be part of taking my wall down, as I have my freaking hungry. I'm going to have this peanut butter and prickly pear jelly that I handmade. I think I should start selling those online or something. Handmade by Mike Wood prickly pear jellies. They're pretty awesome. But anyway.
You say the job is nearly impossible. I think it is impossible to do right. So that's why we have to be more human, so that when we screw up, we can say, look, I screwed up and this is why. And people will understand where you're coming from. Whereas with Freddie Gray, we obviously screwed up. There's no way around this. But yet we still come out and be like, oh, what? We don't know anything. Wait till the facts are out. Bullshit. You had somebody in your possession and he's dead. Stop denying it.
Now, what was all the bullshit about him having a neck injury? That turned out to not be true, right?
Yeah, that was all bullshit.
Was it just something somebody made up online? Is that what it was?
I think he had an old car accident or something like that, and the case had some kind of final disposition that was entered into the court records, but it was harking back to something a long time ago.
So he died from being slammed up against the wall inside the back of a paddy wagon, right? So that's
Correct.
what happened. And what was he arrested for?
Okay, so let's think about...
And for the record, I do not think that is the case anymore. I think that Freddie Gray's neck was injured when the arresting officers dropped a knee on the back of his neck, put him in handcuffs. We don't even have that visual. They did take him down, and he appeared hurt before he got in the van. Seen more evidence, footage from the van not driving. The van driver ended up getting more information about him. I just don't see him doing that. So I really think it has something to do with the first three officers.
Let's put this in real terms.
Okay.
So police always want to put things in legal terms. But you're in a high drug area. A lieutenant sees Freddie Gray, well, allegedly, sees Freddie Gray, recognize him, turn and run. So they chase. They follow him, they catch him, they search him, and do we have a stop and frisk?
No.
We don't. They didn't document a stop and frisk.
So because he's running, does that mean that he's suspicious?
Right. So believe it or not, the law says that that's fine, that you can chase him and you can stop him. So my immediate objection with that case, I don't know why I can't think of it off the top of my head, but that case, there's no clarification on how much force is allowed to be used. So in a stop and frisk, you can actually use a legitimate amount of force. But in that situation, the running, I don't really know how much force is allowed to be used there. So I was curious how much force they used, but apparently they didn't use that much force. And they searched him, and they got a knife out of his pocket. So let's stop at this knife. Now, how do we get into the knife? We searched.
Right.
We went into his pocket.
Illegal
we don't have a stop and frisk.
Right.
But even if you can somehow justify that, the knife that he has is only illegal if it has an internal spring. So how could you feel whether it had an internal spring or not? And how many white people do you think carry a knife with an internal spring? It's going to be the same amount, but do any of them ever get arrested? Never. So,
the internal spring is so fucking stupid.
Stupid.
They have thumb
That
releases
case
for knives now
Illinois
that are
versus
easier than a switchblade.
Wardlow.
the whole thing is stupid. So why do
Yeah.
you create a law like that? You create a law like that so you can fuck with the people that you want to fuck with. That's why we do it.
Because they saw West Side Story.
Something like that.
They had switchblades back then.
And then now everybody's scared,
I had
right?
a switchblade in high school. I thought it was a badass. But then I realized, like, it's just a...
Also, importantly, what we're talking about here is all case laws. And in Crimes and Punishment, my philosophical book on Crimes and Punishments in the 21st Century by Michael Wood Jr., I talk about why case law is problematic and shouldn't have been installed from the beginning. It actually ends up creating a system of an oligarchy where these few elite powerful people make the rules for all of us, and they're actually ambiguous until they hit the case. So you don't know what the law is until a new case is made, and then there's a ruling. So that means all of us non-elites actually don't know what will be a crime and what won't, in more or less terms.
The knife.
Yeah,
If you have a regular knife, it's like a better tool. Like a switchblade's fucking stupid. Spring breaks, it folds up. So this guy had a switchblade? Is that what the deal was?
Well, we haven't seen the knife yet. But they don't even mean a switchblade. What they're saying is, so you have a assisted. So you have a flip out, and you know how some of them you have to use your whole force?
Right.
And some of them are assisted.
Right.
An assisted pocket knife that's
Right.
this big is illegal in Baltimore. But I assure you that everybody that's been arrested with that is 98% going to be black.
So they use it as an excuse.
Absolutely. So we can fuck with who we want to fuck with. It's exactly what we do.
So his knife was essentially like a utility
Also,
knife that people might have in their...
And if you live in a hood,
In
Think you might have a knife on you?
Probably a good idea.
yeah. So
Yeah.
if I would have
Other
caught him, well, I would have probably chased him
that
because
night.
I think he was dealing. Yeah, I would have chased him.
Right.
But I would have stopped him. He didn't have the drugs on him. He wins. I search him. I probably do take out the knife, but I give it back to him and I say, okay, be safe. Sorry about that. And we're good. We're playing the game. We know.
Did it bug you that you were looking for drugs? Did that ever, like, go, what the fuck am I doing being some sort of a glorified revenue collector for the state, pulling people over and for drugs?
Article on iMember Times.
Yeah, you're totally right. There is no
page.
point in any consensual adult agreements to fight against them.
Yeah.
But my whole point is to
Talks
keep it
about
real.
this. My journey
It was
the war on
fucking
drugs.
fun.
It was fun.
It was fucking great.
Fun to catch him?
Yes, I live for the car chase. I mean, you think about this. Think about if you're in a police car and you have the lights and sirens,
Right.
and you're going down like Coastal Highway, or you're going down your favorite 101 or whatever it is, and you're going through your side roads and you're chasing this guy. There is no adrenaline rush that's ever compared to that. You live for it. It's incredible. It's amazing, and you don't really. I didn't really care why. Give me the car chase. It was amazing.
That's so refreshingly honest. I'm so glad you're talking like this, because I always thought that too. I was like, it must be exciting for them, like a fucking
It's amazing.
cheetah chasing a gazelle. You
Right.
know? It's
I have 3 good stories we could tell later on. That, I mean, it's just like, oh, you can understand if you were in that situation.
Is that one of the reasons why so many cops shoot people? It's like the idea of the rush of being in a gunfight, the rush of finding someone who deserves to get shot. You know, it's like when you're hunting, all right? You see animals that you're not supposed to shoot. But I swear to God, there's a part of your fucking brain that wants to shoot a squirrel with like a 300 Win Mag. You don't do it, but there's a part of your brain, you have a rifle, you're looking through the crosshairs, squirrel doesn't even know you're there. You don't do it, but there's a part of you that wants to, and I'm like, why does that even exist? Because people like hitting targets. The same reason why you like going to the range and shooting at those steel targets. Like, why do you? Because people like hitting things with guns. Because you have a gun, like you said, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And when you're in your cop car and someone takes off, whether or not it makes sense to chase them, it must feel like the right thing to do, right? Like your instincts.
I'm going to go with you on the car chase. I'm not going to go with you on the shooting. Was I looking for the target? Yeah, I was. You know, if I had a guy with a knife, I was sitting there, I was telling him, put it down. But in my head, I'm going, oh, fuck, don't put it down.
You want him to come at you so you can shoot
I'm
him.
a fucking cop. I'm going out there. You know, it's
Right.
like, this is what you do. But
you had a line.
and I wasn't going to cross it. I certainly wasn't going to cross it. I was ready to shoot if I had to, but I was never going to cross that line.
But you kind of wanted to shoot.
Sure.
Wow.
I mean, I come from the Marine Corps.
Right.
I was in fast team.
Right.
This is what I did. I was trained from 17. I went in the Marine Corps at 17. I was handled a rifle in boot camp, and I went into special ops, and I was trained day in and day out to kill. That's the honest truth. And then I have to transition into bringing that skill set into the police department, where luckily I was able to separate myself, and it wasn't an issue for me. But I don't think that's where the shootings come from. I'm pretty convinced that your military members actually won't shoot. I'm convinced that the shootings come from fear.
That makes a lot of sense. So the military members have more discipline. They've been through real war, and they understand shooting and death better.
Yeah, I think you just understand the rules of engagement better.
Whereas the people that come from civilian life, and there's a fucking video of this guy who's this big fat slob who's a cop, and he's trying to get a hold of this guy, and the guy winds up beating his ass, and there's like this chaos thing running around. But I'm looking at that guy, and I'm like, this guy does not. There's no way this guy should be a fucking law enforcement officer. He's just way too out of shape. He's just way too undisciplined. You know, his body is just not serving him correctly, and he's involved in physical altercations with criminals. And to be a person that is in day-to-day contact with people that may or may not want to kill you, like, you have to have a certain amount of awareness, and you have to have a certain amount of physical ability.
Yeah, and you have to trust those abilities. You have to realize that you're going to be able to handle that situation. I think it's easier in a city than it would be for a Pennsylvania State Trooper or something. I don't know what I would do in their shoes, and they're stuck out in the middle of nowhere by themselves. In a city, all you got to do is hold on for 30 seconds. You're going to get help. Mm-hmm. But how they do it in those environments, baffling to me. But they don't get into a lot of shootings as much as urban environments, because I think it's that fear. But I think as a nation, we fear the black man. He's the demon. So you saw that in Mike Brown when that cop says, oh, he had a demon's look in his eye. A demon's look in his eye? What are you talking about? Do you ever see anybody say that Dylan Roof, oh, he looked like he had a demon look in his eye. They don't say that. They say, oh, this troubled youth. But the black guy's the demon. So we have that in our society, that's the criminal. So that's who we're looking at, and that's who we're fearing. We're fearing the black man raping our daughters. We're fearing that whether we want to face it or not as a nation, it's real, and we have to face it if we want to learn how to police properly, and we actually want to get our nation back to where it is, and we tear down these borders, these things that we do, these social constructs, your flags, whether we have a line down at Mexico so that they can't come over here and we don't help them, and we have our states, and we do all this so much dumb shit that we just make up to separate ourselves, but there's no difference. He's got more melatonin than I do. Wonderful, whatever.
Yes, I know it's melanin.
Yeah, I mean, we're all the same. We know this. Scientifically, we know this.
I agree with you on that, but the guy that shot the people in Colorado, that was one of the first things they said, is that he looked possessed. His eyes were, I mean, I absolutely agree with you that there's institutionalized racism. I absolutely agree with you. But I think that anytime someone becomes a school shooter, or, I mean, they treat that person like they're some psychopathic maniac.
Yeah, I'll concede that.
Did you get into altercations where you had to shoot people?
I could have pulled the trigger justifiably quite a few times.
But you never did?
No. I mean,
so you went 11 years in Baltimore, in the city, and you didn't have to shoot anybody?
No. I can't. I mean, I know of 2 that were happened pretty close to me that were completely clean shootings. And again, it was an ex-Marine. Maybe I'm being biased. I don't know. But
well, it makes sense to me. I don't think you're being biased at all. I would want someone. First of all, it's a logical progression. If someone is looking for a good job and they get out of the military, it's a logical progression. I would trust military members more than I would trust a civilian who's never seen any real gunfire or any real shit. You know, someone who has never experienced any sort of altercation like that and all of a sudden being thrust into it, you just got to hope they can keep it together. So I know some people can, but a lot of people can't. Someone who's been through the Marines, someone who's been through, you know, anything, a Navy SEAL, someone who's been through war, that person, in my eyes, is a much more qualified candidate than the average person. It makes sense. So when you're talking to me and you're saying that you had a certain amount of discipline and you had a certain, but you're also being very honest about you wanted them to come at you. Yeah. You know, which I think is a natural human instinct. I think it's very important that you're talking like this. I really do. Because I think there's a lot of people that would shy away from talking like that, especially someone who's still out of a career in law enforcement, you know?
I think my hopes for resuming a career in law enforcement are probably over.
Yeah, unless someone comes along and listens to this with an open mind and realizes, no, this fucking guy is exactly what we need. And I think that is exactly what we need. We need people like you. And we need people like you who other people are going to listen to and say, well, here's a guy who's on our side. Here's a guy who's not a racist. Here's a guy who's not just looking to shoot people and lock people up. Here's a guy who really came into this job wanting to help and experienced a bunch of fucking chaos.
Yeah, it's chaos. There's no other better word for it. It's the biggest shit show you'll see is going to an urban environment and being thrust in that, because it's not just, as I was saying, it's not just a street. It's internal as well. The whole thing is a big clusterfuck of mismanagement. And no one's caring about what we actually need to do. We need to end the damn drug war. This is ridiculous that we're doing this.
So that's most of what you're arresting people for?
Oh, gosh. I don't...
Was it all of it?
90%?
Jesus fucking Christ. How crazy is that? How crazy is that? 90%.
That's all that matters there is guns and drugs. Guns and drugs. Guns and drugs. Guns and drugs.
And guns probably are there so they could sell drugs and defend themselves.
And defend themselves, right.
Yeah. Fucking A, man. What a crazy, crazy situation. Just a bizarre police state set up by the fact that drugs are illegal. Man.
It does. I mean, it invades the entire thing. So when we saw what happened with alcohol, right? Mm-hmm. So gangs take over, and you have violence. Do you want to lower the violence? Isn't that the mission of the police? Do you want to lower the violence? Then every single chief out there needs to be saying, hey, we need to end this drug war. Stop it.
Yeah, how many cops are saying that we need to stop bars? How about none? Never heard there was a single bar, you know.
Man, that's what causes all the fighting. Yeah. We all know that if they were all sitting around smoking, nothing would have happened.
Yeah, but also I support their right to get fucked up if they want. You know, I've been drunk a lot, and I've never hurt anybody. Never did anything fucked up. Never caused any crimes. Never hurt anybody. Never, you know. I just don't think that I think human beings should be able to do whatever the fuck they want. I think when you violate, somehow or another, you violate either other people's rights or other people's safety or other people's health and welfare, then it becomes a real issue, and you should be prosecuted based on whatever transgressions you've committed.
Right. So don't you agree then that the drug war distracts you from
Yes.
actually being
100%.
real police?
100%.
Totally turns you away from it.
What kind of relationship did you have with the people in Baltimore that you, like, your area? Did you develop friendships? Did you develop any sort of connection with those folks?
None. I was an occupying force. I handled my stuff and I went out because so to know you, if you were in my neighborhood, I would have to stop and talk to you. Right? I'd have to spend time with you. I'd maybe have to talk to your kids. We could shoot the shit
Everybody
on
I
the corner
got
or
to
something
know
like
is
that. But
really
the whole
off-duty.
time I'm doing that, the departments are going to actually be criticizing me and saying I'm not doing my job.
Because you're not writing tickets,
I'm
or
not
you're
doing-
not pulling
right.
people over, or you're not meeting your quotas.
I'm not getting my stats. I'm not making the arrests that I need to make. So I came out of the academy and went and walked foot where Freddie Gray is in the Gilmore Homes. So that was my first foray. So I got solidified into this us versus them. You threw me right into the biggest war zone we have.
On foot?
On foot. With
How many? Who are you with?
Another trainee that had no
One
idea what the hell he
dude.
was doing either.
You and one
We
other
would
dude.
team up with two others.
So you're playing cops.
Right. We were totally playing.
Wow.
And we were doing all drug arrests. So
Yeah.
we would go up and we would like go in covert and into the projects because the projects had heat and it was wintertime. So you could like break into one of the doors and it had heat in it. And then you could watch what happened in the courtyard.
find it funny
and
how
people would
often
sell.
I
And
say that
we
I
would
broke
have
into something
one
or
of us would
ran
run
a red
down
light or
out of the
something
room,
and you go to
circle
refuse it.
around.
So you would go and
Contemplating.
break into a
Because
room
it
because it
was-
had heat in it?
Right, because they're projects. The heat stays on. So it'd be a vacant
A vacant
apartment, like right, yeah, and the heat would be on.
Did you pick the lock or just kick in
Nah,
the door?
you could always find a way in. Whether it's pick a lock, you could get a key. There was always a way in. Someone else usually already did it for you.
Right.
And we would watch them. And like my first arrest, I went down there and grabbed him. And the first thing he said was, "These aren't my pants," because he knew he had the drugs in him.
So he was wearing
These aren't my
pants. He
pants.
said,
These aren't my pants.
That's the first guy you
Yeah.
arrested?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Boy, did you know you were in for a fucking
It's
world
like,
of weirdness. What a great way to start off a career. That's like the perfect
We
way.
still say that.
The first guy you arrest says, these are not my
Occasionally,
The
pants.
first thing he said, I grabbed his arm. So I go there and I go to the Southern, which is an area where it's you would be fascinated there. I'm just gonna be blatantly honest because that's the whole point of this. Is you have a black ghetto, you have white trash, for the most part, and then you have this cluster next to it of really good people, doctors, lawyers, just regular people that in that area that are nice, and
They were all good people.
mingle together, and it's chaos. So I go from that chaos.
How's it chaos?
Because college kids that are going to University of Maryland think that they can just walk down the street into the bad neighborhood and everything will be fine. They think they can drink and walk down the street and nothing's going to happen to them.
And what does happen?
They're going to get robbed. I mean, they know it. We know it. I mean, they didn't know it. We knew it. It was like, hey, what are you doing? Don't do that.
YouTube comments are pretty weak too. I don't see real
The
questions.
whites in the neighborhood, you would have a really hard time figuring out your reports because you were supposed to put in like who the person's relationship was, and you're like, wait, is it your cousin? Is that wait? So he's your cousin and your uncle. This isn't making sense. So what block do I put? The guy that did it, was he your cousin or no? He was your uncle? It's like no. And everything was all together. So like there's so much inbreeding
Really?
that you would have these crazy things. That you would have Hispanics that came in and were trying to come up themselves. And it was all just go together. It's chaos. You can go there right now. And it's just a crazy societal test bed of everybody coming together from these entirely different backgrounds.
And there's real inbreeding?
Yeah.
It's like
Big
super
time.
common?
Everybody knows it. Yeah.
Really? What the fuck?
So I go from there and I go to this,
So inbreeding's like, you run into that every day.
I do see in the
Not every
comments
day.
that
Once a week.
people
yeah, maybe. If you're working there.
saw that.
So I go from there and I go to the Northern District, which is
trying to be honest
this area called Mount
about
Washington.
the
Mount Washington
experiences.
is an upper class,
Just here to answer
80%
questions.
to 90% white. You have judges that live there. You have nice houses, $400,000, $500,000 houses. And now I'm in this environment. And it's like, holy shit, where am I? Yeah, I'm in white land now. I have this road that's called Cross Country Boulevard, and it has a stream next to it. What the hell am I doing here? So I'm expected to get the same amount of arrests, and I'm expected to write the tickets. So I have bosses that are telling me, like, you're not doing anything. Like, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm like in a good neighborhood. What do I do? So I would leave my area, go to the black neighborhoods, and make drug arrests so that I could appease my bosses with my arrest numbers. So you're continuing that cycle once again. I'm leaving that area to go poach and specifically continue that cycle. And I'm doing it because that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
So if you were in a place that had no crime, you would get in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, I had my one sergeant had to defend me constantly
so
because I
true.
went to
So
a
annoying.
post in that same district where I started bringing the crime numbers down,
Sounds a
but I
good
didn't have the
cop summer
arrests.
with this crap.
And he had to defend me to his bosses, saying, like, look, he hasn't had a serious crime in a long time. That's his job.
Go out there and solve
I was
issues and
getting
get in
criticized the whole
trouble
time
for
because I didn't have as many arrests.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate goal, right? Is to have no crime.
Shouldn't that be the metric?
That should be.
It's not a metric.
But if we all had no crime, like I've often proposed this, like if we had a moratorium on crime, if the whole country got together and said, all right, no one for the next month, we can go 30 days without speeding, 30 days without illegal turns, 30 days without any violent crime, 30 days without any theft, what would happen?
We'd probably make some up. But
You'd make up some crimes.
Of course they would.
Just to arrest black
Sure.
people,
That's-
probably,
would be-
right?
that would
race
be
being a
what
social
reality is.
construct. Come on,
But
people. Race is a social
that's what we should.
construct.
So,
Jesus.
like, my
If you want something that's real nice and easy to
idea
go
of
to, there's
policing
a
would be to
PBS
empower
special
that officer
called
that's on the street. So
Race.
even if there
Oh, actually,
wasn't
let me see what
crime,
it's called. Hold on.
then what he would really be doing is making sure that the alley was cleaned up, solving problems that are in the neighborhood. So whatever the problem could possibly be, there's this guy that constantly parks on this corner and the street sweeper can't get it. Well, fix all those problems. So even if you don't have crime, the peace officer, the protector, should still have
It's called
plenty of
race,
things to
the
do.
power of an
So
illusion.
it shouldn't be
PBS.
just crime. Crime should
Go
be
there.
an element.
Understand, race
of
is a
what
social
policing.
construct.
Did you have to pull over people and write tickets for like speeding and shit like that, or no?
Baltimore doesn't care about that.
They don't care.
No.
You could just drive crazy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Really?
Yeah, there's no traffic cops or anything like that in the city.
What?
Yeah, it just doesn't work that way.
What?
Yeah.
There's no traffic cops?
I mean, maybe a district here or there might have one guy that kind of primarily does traffic, but it's just patrol officers are expected to handle traffic. And again, remember, I'm not being judged
Right.
on that. So why would I care?
Right.
So my car stop, the only reason I do a car stop is to get guns or drugs, or maybe a warrant. Like, so if I
you'd run a plate.
Right. And the guy has a warrant, driver has a warrant, then yeah, I'm going to do that. So I'm not going to do it unless I have a possibility of an arrest. I'm not going to sit there and write bullcrap tickets.
Did you arrest the same guys more than once?
Yeah, plenty of times, especially when I was doing narcotics. So after I went from the Northern, I went to a unit called the Violent Crime Impact Division, and I was like plain clothes, got to have the tats out and be all tough and run around like you were, they called knockers in the city.
Somebody asked in a YouTube question about if I talk about my degree and if it helped. Yeah, education certainly was a big thing that really opened my eyes. Getting a bachelor's degree in criminal justice just kind of made me realize that criminal justice didn't know what it was talking about, or that none of the things had been working in criminal justice, criminology, law, whatever you want to say. And then I switched with my master's to business management because I wanted to pursue the aspect of how we would manage our way out of this, considering this is just an organization. And then I pursued my PhD in business management education because I wanted to educate on the issues, because I realized we had to teach mid-level managers really how to implement these changes and stuff, how to talk to them, get curriculum through, stuff like that. So I needed to focus in a way like that. And the biggest thing was actually, I think, critical thinking. And I didn't get any critical thinking classes until first or second year of my PhD courses. And I thought that is absolutely ridiculous. It should have been the first thing we focused on. And so that became a big issue within civilian-led policing, that I think that's the requirement, is to successfully complete a difficult course on critical thinking skills. I think the world would be very different if critical thinking skills were focused early on in education. I shouldn't have been in like my 20th year of school before that became a point of focus.
And so from there, you're dealing with the same street level dealers all the time. And one of those kids actually really struck me. So a great irony that I had in doing drug work is usually drug work sends you to the deeper into it. And it actually pulled me out because I would interview these guys in the little rooms. And this one guy, Daniel Taylor, is the one I'm specifically remembering. And he was just a marijuana dealer. And he had a kid, and he was struggling to have this kid. He was young. He was trying to help, but he had gotten locked up a lot when he was younger. So he was selling weed to just like buy diapers for his kid. And he would tell me his stories, and like, we would be there, and he would be crying. And it was just like, fuck, there's no difference between this kid and me. There's nothing. The only difference between this kid and me is that when I had a dime bag in my pocket, there wasn't a fucking chance in hell someone was going to look. But him, he was going to get caught eventually, and it sent him into that spiral. And this could have been a good kid, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was still in jail now. And there was just nothing wrong with him. Our whole system created a criminal out of a decent kid, and it was shocking to me. Like I knew I was following the rules, and so I had to arrest him. I had to finish this up because I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. But it was kind of heartbreaking to start to see that these people, they weren't different than us. They just had a different environment than us, and we should be changing that environment, not changing them.
So you felt this. So let me back up a bit. This going into this district and this new position, why were you allowed to wear regular clothes, and what was the idea? You're supposed to blend in? Is that the...
Another comment in here says, I'm anti-police. I just want to interrupt the sitter and say, I'm not anti-cop. When have I ever said anything anti-cop? I get so tired of hearing that. That's ridiculous.
Idea?
Yeah, so you're supposed to have an advantage to sneak up and all that. And so I have to tell a quick funny story about that.
But you're a white guy.
Yeah, this is a really good story. You're going to appreciate it.
Okay.
So that's always a struggle, right? So the tattoos help.
Blackface?
No.
No?
Stop it. So
why is that bad? I don't understand it. I really don't. Go ahead.
So the tats were out. I had a red Mazda 6 with tinted windows, Virginia tags, cut off sleeves, was rolling down thinking I was
blending in.
This is it. I look like I'm some buying. This is going to be anything.
Should you consider maybe like carving a lightning bolt in your hair?
I should have done something crazy.
Yeah,
to look a little more just kind of like I was out there buying.
Like you're transracial, perhaps.
I'm not opening that can either. You're not going to.
Well, the can's already open. You don't even have to dig in. It's overflowing.
I don't have an opinion on that.
I'm so happy that girl's alive. I'm so happy this debate is on.
It gives you fodder.
Well, yes. I'm a fan of human folly. So you're rolling around like a white guy sticking out like a sore thumb.
Thinking I wasn't. And turned the corner, and literally, like a 4-year-old boy, he's like, yo, Dad, them knockers right there. I was like, fuck, This is as good as I get. This is all I have. And I still couldn't blend in. So what was the point? There wasn't one. So
they knew that there's a position that cops get into where they're allowed to dress like normal people.
We're called knockers in Baltimore.
And you're called knockers by the police department as well, or just by the civilians?
Civilians. And why do you think they're called knockers? You know, obvious answer.
Why?
Knock heads. That's what you do.
Oh, I see.
You run the street. You're the force. You're the enforcement team. So that's actually what it was called, as an enforcement team. We went out there and stamped down the drug.
Is there pressure to be intimidating, to...
You must.
Yes.
You must be intimidating. I wouldn't survive. So you can look at me, and you can think of me being in The Wire. Mm-hmm. And Jamie, would I have survived if I was not intimidating?
No.
No, I wouldn't have survived.
I need to watch The Wire. God damn it.
So, like, a technique is actually to find one of the biggest, baddest dudes in your area.
And kick his ass?
Punk him.
Punk him?
Yeah, you have to. So,
do you use weapons, or how do you do it?
No. You're going to arrest him for something. You're going to be a little rough with him. You're going to do something to... Because he's the king dog in that neighborhood.
Right.
So you have to assume the alpha role. If you don't do that, you're going to get run over. A lot of cops don't do it. But if you don't do that, you are not going to survive in a drug unit for sure. You're going to get trampled.
Why do you survive if you do it? I would think you're making an enemy.
Yeah, it's a battle. It's a war. It's what it is. It's a drug war. Don't be fooled that that's what it is. That's what we've created. So it's us versus them. And if I'm going to be ahead, I have to be the alpha dog, right?
You know, obviously never been a cop, but I worked as a security guard for a while at this concert place, and one of the things that I recognized really early on was that there was a us versus them mentality just from fucking security guards at a concert place. And I would imagine the us versus them between cops and the people on the street gets pretty fucking intense. Pretty big division.
And that is how you can have a black officer who's participating in a racist organization, just like anybody else.
Did you have a lot of black officers you worked
in
with?
Baltimore is about even.
Wow.
So, but there's no difference. Maybe even the black officers are a little bit more aggressive. I have a theory on that, but
well, that was an Ice-T thing. Ice-T used to talk about that in his songs.
NWA rapped about it. Right,
yeah, that I think that's what they've always felt. That there was black cops that made up for the fact that they were black by being extra brutal.
Yeah, that's what they thought. I don't actually think that that's why. It's conjecture on my part, but I think that's because they're actually, they feel embarrassed that those people, they feel like the black criminals are making the black race, the black community look bad. So they're kind of like extra angry, whereas I'm not going to be angry because I don't care.
Oh, I see. Huh. Maybe it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Or either or.
Sure, certainly, for different people.
Wow. What the fuck, dude? What a crazy life you lived.
Yeah, I didn't think about it like that at the time.
Right, but now, being out of it, how long did it take before you realized how fucking crazy it was?
It started when I was in, but...
It started with, like, talking to that kid that was...
Right, and then I would also sit in covert and watch... So, you'll love this. One time I was... we were doing a long investigation, and I had this vacant building that I would hide in. A homeless dude was there, and a homeless dude would like leave magazines for me, and then like I would come in during the day, and he would come in at night. It was the weirdest exchange. We never crossed paths though.
He would leave magazines for you?
Yeah. It was
like
weird
what,
thing.
Cop Monthly?
Yeah, no. It was a Cop Monthly. He'd leave Playboy, or he'd leave
High Times.
Yeah, High Times, something like that. Whatever he had, and he knew I was there. I knew he was there, but we never actually crossed paths. But they had a.
So he left them for you though?
Yeah. We both knew we were there, and he had there was a picture, big huge picture of Jesus filling the window. And so I carved out Jesus' eyes, and I would stand behind him.
This was so funny.
And that's how I watched. So it had like this double meaning.
Such a good memory.
Jesus Christ.
So I was actually standing behind him watching all the drug dealers on the investigation. But while I would watch all these investigations like that, you would see everything for what it was and not for your perceptions because you were there for so long. So I would see the dealer sitting there, but then I would see him take care of his kid. I would see him sit down and make food. I would hear the other people in the neighborhood talking about their lives and hearing the smells of this, hearing the sounds, smelling the smells, and realizing that this wasn't a war. This is ridiculous that we were doing this. This was not the enemy. This was a socioeconomic problem that we had to deal with, but this isn't the enemy. We are not at war. This is preposterous.
So by being embedded in their community, you recognize that we really are, or you really were, an occupying force in just a community that's trying to get by. Just a bunch of people that are just like you or I, but their circumstances were unfortunate. They were born into this situation where this cycle is perpetuated over and over and over again, and you got a chance to see it.
All right, let's not fool ourselves. We all won the lottery here by being born in America.
Mm-hmm.
We all won the lottery by being white. So we have to recognize
that. Not Rachel.
Not gonna let it go, are you?
She's not. She's not white. She identifies as black.
I don't have an opinion on that. I don't.
You should.
Don't send me down
Everybody
that rabbit hole.
Everybody should.
I'm not sure if anyone should still have an opinion on that. Oh, man. All right, let's just cut it here. We're going to end the first part and be back next episode to pick up where we left off in another, so it doesn't get too long. But I don't know. This all isn't too bad. Some things I wish I wouldn't have said. Wish I could have said things differently. But it's part of the process. It's part of the development. I don't know. I guess people like me more in this way. Anyway. So let's just come back next episode. What a great point to stop. I don't know about Rachel Dolezal. I thought that was pretty up. I don't know. awkward of him to throw me under that on that one. But that's all right. So let's go ahead, catch back up with me next episode, and we'll continue to get into this Joe Rogan Experience and reviewing it. All in all, that's not too bad. I don't feel too bad about it. It feels weird seeing Joe be nice to me. Like he is on camera. I don't know, man. I just felt like he wasn't even courteous enough to give me basic replies to basic things. So, whatever. Doesn't matter. Anyway, catch you next week. Peace. Thanks. This has been produced by Teddy Bear Chola Productions for iMemberMedia.com.